Hey guys, this is Chris from Deus Ex Machina. This started off as a very long video. I decided to break it up and talk about why I write, the process of how I write, and hopefully give advice to people, not necessarily how to write because your writing style is your own, but if you're suffering from some of the similar conditions that I suffer from, ways that you can try to work around that to try to become a functional writer. But this is more or less a window into my writing style, such that it is, as I've often said, I don't think I'm as good a writer as some people think I am, but it shows you the process. So let's go into it. I have friends that will say that they will not pick up a novel unless it challenges them narratively, like the actual prose is intractable. It's something that they have to fight with to be understood. And if you're one of those people, that's fine. You will never find that with my writing, because I want my stories to be about the setting and the people and the characters and what they're saying and what they're doing. I don't want people to fight with the prose to understand the story I'm trying to tell. And that's very much a comic movie mentality, where you can shoot, you know, comics will play with their format, they'll play with their frames, but at the end of the day, you still have to kind of understand. Like, they're not going to create a comic where, you know, you have to read it partly backwards and forwards, and the story doesn't make any sense unless you read it in a very, there's no code you have to decipher. At the end of the day, you're reading the panels left to right unless there's a clear visual language that tells you to go up and down. And so when you see a situation like this, you're seeing a visual language that's telling you very specifically that you're going downward, and these are happening after this event, and then you move down here. When you get to this, you know you're reading this top area here, then you're going here, and then you're going up to down. But there's visual language that tells you how you should be reading. If you were going to this frame and the story didn't tell you that you actually needed to read from here and go backwards, that would be a flaw in the visual language being conveyed. Some people will think, no, that's a challenge, but most people in the comic industry would say that's a failure in visual language. And with novels, there's a lot of people that don't believe that. They think that all bets are off. And I'm not saying that's wrong. I am simply saying that I can't write in a way where I'm going to fight with the reader in understanding what I have to say. I always feel as if there's enough people that are going to have problems reading my style already. Why should I make it more complicated for them? So that tells you a little bit about the mentality, my justification for the way I write. I write very, I can say, literal, which means I'm very much the fact. I have to try to fight myself. I very much have to force myself to put in characters' feelings. I generally will say that they'll nod, they'll say yes, they'll respond with an angry statement, but I won't often say that they're angry. They'll convey that in their actions. I have to try to convince myself to not do that, to go into people's minds. One of my biggest rewrites in Aiden's Way is that I went in there and I included what people were feeling, because I always felt detached physically. And that's one thing that I took from screenwriting, which I didn't have to do. I can dive into people's minds when you're writing a novel. In screenwriting, you don't, unless you're David Lynch and Dune, and you're constantly hearing what's going on in people's heads. Most people don't. Most movies are not shot that way. Very, very few do that, and most people look at that now as going, that was a flaw in how that story was told. The same way as, you know, Ridley Scott preferred there not be narration in Blade Runner because it conveyed too much. It just basically didn't try to hide what the characters were feeling. And there are certain moments where narration, first-person narration in a movie does work, like in Fight Club. But most of the time it doesn't. But in novels, you can dive into people's minds, and I have to force myself to do that more often. But when it comes to the way I write, I generally, my ADHD forces me to get to the point as soon as possible, which means very often I won't spend time exploring how characters are thinking and feeling when they're in a scene with somebody else. A good example would be something like this masterpiece right here, right? We talked about it just a few seconds ago, right? Where we will have dialogue, and then somebody else will say something, but then it's a half page before someone else says something, and then someone else says something else, and it's another quarter page until someone says something else. And one of the reasons why people do that is that most of the time in novels, they remove banter. When characters say something, they say what needs to be said in that scene, and then the scene either ends or we move on to somebody countering with something else that needs to be said. The idea of banter I don't often see. And that's something that we do see in real life. That's something we see whenever we see movies. We see people talking. And when we see some of the most successful screenplays out there, a lot of them involve characters bantering. They have conversations where they're firing yes/no questions to each other, where they're firing quick little sentences. And very few novels I've read in my time, and some people will probably post notable exceptions to this, have gone in and just been quick banter. A lot of times they look at this and go, well, this quick banter can be removed because it's not going anywhere. And I go, well, no. It's showing the chemistry between characters. There have been very few moments where I've seen dialogue on a movie I've enjoyed where I went, you know what, that could be removed. That was unnecessary. That whole line was unnecessary. And I'm a big fan of Aaron Sorkin for that, because Aaron Sorkin, a good example would be if you read the screenplay for Steve Jobs. It's generally with screenplays, it's 1 minute per page, so 120 pages is about 2 hours. But Steve Jobs is about I think 175 pages, but it's a 2-hour movie, just under 2 hours, and that's because the characters talk in rapid succession, very often over top of each other. And you would think that you would see this in novels, but I've never read a novel in my life where you had people that were rapid fire talking in quick succession over top of one another. The writer would generally cut out most of that as being unnecessary, get to the point, or break it up with prose. And once again, this is one of the greatest novels in the history of mankind, so obviously he's doing something right. But in that same context, as someone with ADHD, I will find myself skipping paragraphs because I'm incapable of focusing on a scene where what is effectively a 30-second scene is pulled apart into 4 or 5 pages. This has been Chris from Deus Ex Machina, and I'll see you guys next time. Like and subscribe. Peace.